They say prey can always feel the predator. Christina felt nothing but warmth when he told her to hide, which was, perhaps, exactly why she was already lost. Christina Graham didn't realize the man watching her from the shadows of the cabin was the Alpha King. Not until it was far too late to run. The forest had been silent when she entered it at dusk. 3 days. 3 nights. No sleep that lasted longer than minutes stolen against tree bark. No food beyond what she'd grabbed fleeing the ravine. No silence in her head that wasn't filled with the sound of what she'd witnessed. The crack of bone, the smell of blood, the Alpha King's face turning slowly in the dark as the last body dropped. Find her. 2 words. That was all it had taken to end her life as she knew it. Now the sky split open above the canopy, like it had been waiting for her to slow down. Rain came in violent sheets, lashing through the trees sideways, soaking through her jacket in seconds. Thunder detonated overhead, close enough to rattle her lungs, close enough to taste. The wind rose into something that didn't sound like wind anymore. It sounded purposeful, hungry. Her auburn hair whipped across her face. Her green eyes burned. Her legs were past pain now, operating on something rawer than adrenaline, the ancient animal knowledge that stopping meant dying. Then she saw it. The cabin materialized through the storm like something her desperation had conjured. Low and dark, half swallowed by the tree-line, a single breath of amber light trembling behind its shuttered window. No time to think. No alternatives left. Christina shoved the door open and stumbled inside. And froze. He was already there, leaning against the far wall like he'd grown from the shadows themselves, tall, broad, utterly still. Dark hair damp from rain, sharp features thrown into relief by firelight, all hard angles and quiet severity. He wasn't reaching for anything, wasn't moving, just watching. His eyes found hers immediately. Dark, depthless. The kind of eyes that didn't scan a room, they read it. They read her, in the span of a single breath, and what unsettled her most wasn't the danger she saw there. It was the calm. Every instinct she had screamed run. Outside, the storm answered like a closing fist. The man pushed off the wall, unhurried, like he had all the time that she didn't. When he spoke, his voice was low, not soft, never soft, but measured in the way of someone who had never needed to raise it to be obeyed. Hide here until morning. Not a question, not a suggestion, a decision that had already been made. Christina's pulse hammered against her throat. Her hand was still on the door. One push, and she was back in the rain, back in the dark, back in the open forest where his hunters were already moving between the trees. She stepped inside. The door swung shut behind her. The storm raged. And somewhere deep in the woods, closing in from every direction, the hunt continued. She just didn't know yet that it had already found her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Christina stood with her back almost touching the door, water dripping from her hair onto the floorboards, her breathing audible despite every effort to control it. The fire crackled in the hearth. The storm hammered the walls. And the man across the room simply watched her, the way something apex watches something small. Not with hunger, with patience. You're soaked. His voice again. Same register. Low, unhurried, like thunder that hadn't decided yet whether to strike. She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were moving, cataloging the space the way 3 days of survival had trained her to. One room, one shuttered window, one door at her back, a bed pushed against a far wall, a single wooden chair beside the hearth, and a fire that guttered and spat like it was fighting to stay alive. No exits that weren't already his. I'm just passing through, she said. Traveler. The storm caught me off guard. The lie came out steadier than she felt. He didn't respond, didn't nod or challenge or blink. Just let the silence sit between them like a third presence in the room, heavy and patient and completely unbothered by her explanation. He didn't believe her. She felt it the way you feel a drop in temperature, not heard, not seen. Simply known. Outside, something threaded through a gap in the thunder.
Distant.
Rhythmic.
Low.
Not wolves. Christina's stomach turned to ice. His eyes didn't move to the window. Didn't react at all. Which meant he'd already heard it. Had known before she did. And had chosen stillness over alarm. That terrified her more than the sound itself. He reached up and pulled off his coat in one motion. No performance to it. No invitation. Just a man shedding wet layers, and yet the simple act rewrote the geometry of the room entirely. The breadth of his shoulders. The controlled economy of how he moved. No weapons visible anywhere on him. No blade, no steel, nothing she could name. And yet, he was the most dangerous thing she had ever been in a room with. She was certain of it the way she was certain of her own heartbeat. He nodded toward the fire. Come here. You'll lose heat standing there. Every rational instinct said no. Her body took the step anyway, closing the distance by half, stopping just beyond arm's reach, lowering herself to the floor near the hearth where the warmth reached out like something merciful. She didn't look at him directly. She was aware of him the way you are aware of a live current, not touching but feeling the charge regardless. I don't trust you, she thought. She held her hands toward the fire and said nothing. Outside, the hunters moved through the dark. Inside, the silence between them stretched, thin and taut and dangerously close to something neither of them had names for.
Yet.
The fire was the problem. Christina sat with her hands extended toward it, watching the flames move, orange and consuming and merciless, and felt something she'd kept sealed for 3 days begin to crack open. She tried to look away. She couldn't. The other fire had been bigger, wild, deliberate, the kind that doesn't start from accident. Bodies on the ground, her people, and the smoke rising black against a sky that didn't care. The screaming had already stopped, which was somehow worse. And at the center of all of it, a man, still, unhurried, watching the destruction like it was simply work. Dark hair, broad shoulders, eyes that moved across the carnage and found it acceptable. The Alpha King. Henry. The name left her lips before she could stop it. The man across the fire went absolutely still. Not the loose, watchful stillness from before. Something different. Tighter. The stillness of something that has just been handed dangerous information and is deciding very carefully what to do with it. The silence stretched. I saw something. Her voice came out fractured, barely above the fire's crackle. 3 nights ago. Something I wasn't supposed to see. She kept her eyes on the flames. The Alpha King is hunting me. His men are in these woods right now. A beat. You saw his face. Too careful. The question was too careful. She looked up, met his eyes directly for the first time. Yes. Something moved behind his expression, quick and controlled and gone before she could name it. He knew exactly what she was now. He stayed anyway. He moved without explanation. That was what unsettled her most. Not what he did, but how quietly he decided to do it. No discussion. No negotiation. He simply stood, and the cabin reorganized itself around his purpose. The window first. He checked the shutters, pressing his palm flat against the wood, testing gaps she hadn't noticed. Then the door, something wedged beneath it. Subtle, effective. He crossed to the far corner and crouched, doing something near the floorboards she couldn't see clearly. Blocking scent trails. The thought surfaced from somewhere instinctive and immediately made no sense. She watched him from the fire. What are you doing? Making sure we aren't found.
We.
The word landed strangely. She didn't examine it. When he finished, he positioned himself near the door, not sitting, not resting, standing between her and whatever was outside. The hunters. The dark. The thing wearing his king's orders like a second skin. Christina's instincts ran two directions simultaneously and nearly tore her in half. Run from him. Stay close to him. She stayed. The fire burned lower. The storm pressed against the walls. Sometime in the long silence, he reached past her toward the woodpile stacked beside the hearth, close, suddenly, without warning, and the proximity hit her like a physical thing. The warmth of him, the controlled stillness, the way the firelight caught the sharp line of his jaw. Their arms almost touched. She pulled back. His eyes cut briefly to hers. Unreadable. I won't hurt you. Simple.
Flat.
Like a fact about weather.
Christina said nothing.
Turned back to the fire. Pressed her hands together in her lap to stop them from trembling. She didn't know why she almost believed him. That frightened her most of all. She didn't know why she started talking. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the fire, the false warmth of it, the way the cabin had created a temporary illusion of safety. Maybe it was simply that 3 days of running alone had filled her up past capacity, and something had to come out. He's tall, she said quietly. Broader than most. Dark hair. Her eyes were on the flames. There's a scar here. She touched her own jaw, left side, a thin diagonal line she'd memorized in the split second before she'd run. Across the cabin, the man said nothing. His eyes are the worst part. Her voice dropped.
Dark.
Like he's already decided something about you before you've spoken. Like she stopped. Searched for the word. Like nothing you do will surprise him. The silence that followed was absolute. And if you saw him again? His voice.
Low.
Careful. The question placed between them like something fragile and sharp simultaneously. Christina looked up. I'd run. Something crossed his face. There and extinguished. But she felt the shift. The way the air in the room changed. The way his stillness took on a different quality. Heavier. The authority in it no longer quite contained, leaking into the space between them like heat from the fire. He seemed to fill the cabin differently than he had a moment ago. Larger somehow. More absolute. Christina's eyes moved over him slowly. The set of his shoulders. The unhurried command in how he simply existed in a room. Something tugged at the edge of her mind. She almost reached for it. Then the hunters held outside, and the thought dissolved. She never looked back down at his jaw, at the scar. The storm made the decision for her. A crack of thunder, violent, close, the kind that felt personal, and something inside Christina simply gave way. 3 days of running. 3 nights of no sleep. The weight of what she'd seen, what she carried. What she'd lost pressing down until the structure, holding it all collapsed quietly and without warning.
She didn't sob.
Nothing that dramatic. She just stopped holding it. I watched them die, she said. All of them. And I ran. Her voice was flat the way voices go flat when emotion has burned past the point of expression. I just ran. He had moved closer.
She didn't know when.
Close enough that the firelight caught them both in the same breath of warmth. I'm so tired. The confession came out barely above a whisper. I don't know how much longer. You're still here. Simple. Like a fact. Like the most important fact. She looked up. He was right there. Close in a way that should have triggered every alarm left functioning inside her. Dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that had abandoned all pretense of casual. The sharp line of his jaw. The steady, unhurried presence of him. The space between their faces was almost nothing. She could feel the warmth of his breath. Why are you helping me? The whisper came out fractured.
Genuine.
The most honest thing she'd said all night. He didn't answer. The silence stretched between them, thin and taut and trembling with everything neither of them would say. His eyes dropped. Just once. Just briefly. Then he pulled back. Barely. An inch that felt like a decision. Sleep, he said quietly. I'll keep watch. Christina didn't move for a long moment. Then she let herself believe him. Just for now. She woke to silence. After 3 days of rain and thunder and the constant percussion of fear, the quiet was disorienting. Christina lay still for a moment, blinking at the cabin ceiling, gray morning light pressing through the shuttered window. The storm had passed. He was standing near the door. Hadn't slept. She understood that immediately. The stillness of a man who had kept watch the entire night, exactly as he'd promised.
She almost said thank you.
Then the footsteps came. Multiple. Deliberate. Surrounding the cabin from 3 directions simultaneously with the coordinated precision of men who did this for a living. Christina was on her feet instantly. They're here. I know.
Too calm.
Wrong kind of calm. She grabbed his arm. We have to move the window, we can. The door exploded inward. For men.
Armed.
Filling the small space immediately, hands on weapons, eyes scanning, and then stopping. All of them simultaneously stopping. The weapons lowered. The men dropped their heads. Alpha King. 2 words. The cabin contracted around them. Christina's hand was still on his arm. She felt it beneath her fingers, the absence of surprise in his body. No tension. No fear. Nothing that resembled the response of a man who had just been found. Because he hadn't been found. He'd never been lost. She let go, stepped back, and looked at him, really looked, the way you look at something when every prior version of it has just been stripped away. The scar on his jaw. The dark eyes that saw everything and revealed nothing. The authority that had been there from the first moment, never hidden. Only unnamed. The man from the massacre. The Alpha King.
Henry.
You. The word came out broken. He turned to face her. And said nothing. She ran. No thought. No plan. Pure animal instinct. Out the door. Past the hunters who parted without touching her. Into the pale morning air that tasted of wet pine and everything she'd lost in the last 3 days. She made it 6 steps. His hand closed around her arm, not violent, not cruel, but absolute. Immovable as stone. She spun on him. You lied. Yes. The honesty of it hit harder than denial would have. You would have run, he said. You said so yourself. You were going to kill me. Her voice cracked on the last word, the full weight of the night collapsing into it. The fire. The trust. The almost kiss. All of it reframed now, rearranged into something grotesque. His jaw tightened. I still might. The words landed like a blade. Christina's breath left her completely. Then the trillion exploded. Not his hunters, something else. Figures moving fast, coordinated wrong. They hit the cabin from 2 sides simultaneously, and the chaos that followed happened in fragments. Glass with splintering, the metallic ring of drawn weapons, a hunter going down hard to her left. Someone grabbed for her. Henry moved faster. What happened next didn't look like fighting. It looked like weather. Like something elemental that had been carefully contained all night, finally given permission to exist. He dismantled the first man without breaking stride, the second with an efficiency that was almost incomprehensible, his presence expanding to fill the space with something that made the air vibrate. Alpha dominance. Raw and total and terrifying. But they kept coming. More than expected. More than manageable. Henry's eyes cut to hers across the chaos. Something urgent passed between them. Stay close. They backed her into the corner.
2 of them.
Henry occupied elsewhere, 3 against 1 at the cabin's far wall, and Christina had nothing. No weapon, no exit, no options left. Fear peaked. Then something underneath the fear cracked open. It didn't feel like power. Not at first. It felt like pressure, a rising heat beneath her sternum, spreading outward through her bloodstream like something that had been waiting for exactly this. For the moment, survival instinct burned through whatever had been suppressing it. The surge left her palms first. The 2 men flew backward like the air itself had decided against them. One hit the wall. One hit the floor. Neither got up. Silence detonated through the cabin. Henry turned, looked at her across the wreckage, the smoke, the bodies, the dying firelight, with an expression she'd never seen on him before. Not surprise exactly. Recognition. The remaining attackers broke. Whatever they'd come for, whatever calculation had sent them into these woods, the math had just changed catastrophically. They moved for the door and didn't stop. Then it was over. Smoke. Stillness. The sound of morning birds beginning somewhere impossibly far away. Henry's hunters stood in a loose formation, watching. Waiting. Every eye moving between their king and the girl in the corner, whose hands were still trembling with something none of them had words for. Henry turned to face his men. The silence stretched. "She's under my protection." 3 words that weren't a shelter. They were a declaration. A line drawn across everything: duty, law, consequence. War-level consequence, and he knew it. Shock rippled visibly through the men.
Christina stared at him.
Still afraid. Still furious. Still feeling the pull of him like a current she couldn't swim against no matter how hard she tried. He turned to her last. The scar on his jaw. The dark eyes that had watched her all night across a fire, knowing exactly who he was and exactly what she didn't know. She should hate him. Parts of her did. But the bond between them hummed beneath all of it. Older than the night. Older than the hunt. Older than whatever war his 3 words had just ignited. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "No," he agreed. "It isn't." Outside, the forest held its breath. And somewhere in the distance, the first consequences of his choice were already moving through the trees.